On today's episode, Anthony Pompliano outlook on Bitcoin for 2021.
Now, when it comes to Bitcoin, it has such asymmetry to it. It basically is kind of this apex predator, if you will. It can do everything.
Anthony Pompliano, often simply known as Pomp, is one of the most bullish Bitcoin investors around. Over 50% of his net worth is in Bitcoin, and he has never been afraid to say it out loud.
Over 50% of my net worth in Bitcoin, and I don't plan to sell
I
it.
forbid that. That's insane.
You forbid that.
Last year, he predicted Bitcoin will reach $100,000 by the end of 2021. But after the latest Bitcoin rally, how have Pomp's views changed?
More educated investors, better infrastructure, and then new market entrants with large pockets end up driving the price of a scarce asset higher.
Find out about Pomp's Bitcoin outlook for 2021.
On top 5, we drop a new video every single day, so be sure to smash the subscribe and like button. Thank you in advance. Also, if you'd like to diversify your income, I recommend you using this program. The link will be in the description below.
Recently, we've seen that Bitcoin approaches all-time high within a completely different landscape than when it was during the peak high of 2017. In your opinion, how is the current rally different from the previous one in 2017?
Yeah, I think the main difference is just there's been much more time for people to get educated on what exactly this asset is. And then also at the same time, there's been a lot more infrastructure that's been built out. So when you have a more educated kind of investor base, also giving them more infrastructure to buy, sell, custody, etc., you're going to end up having something that looks much less like a blow off top or kind of bubble type mania, and instead you're basically going to get true adoption. And so not only does that help the people who are already in Bitcoin in terms of 2017 and before, but also now what you have is you have new market entrants. So you've got many large kind of institutional investors, whether they're pensions, foundations, endowments, or they are Wall Street financial institutions. You're starting to see more and more of them kind of look at the macro landscape, understand the challenges there, and seek Bitcoin as a kind of portfolio exposure. And so those three things, kind of more educated investors, better infrastructure, and then new market entrants with large pockets end up driving the price of a scarce asset higher. When you start to look at very, very large asset managers, hedge funds with billions of dollars, you start to understand that they're not going to invest small dollars here, right? They're going to look to put hundreds of millions of dollars, if not single digit billions of dollars into the market. And so naturally, when you have a larger average kind of purchase amount, you're going to have a much bigger impact on the market, right? It takes way more retail investors to match those institutional investors. And so that's just a classic market dynamic. That's not special to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. It's just how markets work. And when you have a market cap that's still relatively small in the grand scheme of things, it's only $350 billion, then you're starting to look at a world where you say it doesn't really take that much money to move the market price higher either. And so I think that's where institutions are kind of faced with a situation where they want to get exposure, they want to put it in their portfolio in the size that they want, but they also are trying to be very kind of slick about the way that they get the exposure without moving the market price. And so, I think we'll continue to see this trend over time. I think that we've really only started to see the beginning of that institutional adoption, but as it kind of cranks up here, I think we'll see a pretty aggressive increase in the US dollar price of Bitcoin. Yes, there are 18.5 million in circulating supply, but if you think about 63%, 65% of Bitcoin haven't moved in the last 12 months. And so all of a sudden you couple that with, let's say, like a Grayscale GBTC, where they're basically buying Bitcoin and they're putting it in cold storage. It almost like disappears. It's called like the Bitcoin black hole. And so actually you've got about 65% of Bitcoin that hasn't moved, which means out of 18.5 million, you're talking about 11 million or so that have gone nowhere, right? 10 million that have gone nowhere. And so really the addressable supply is, let's call it, plus or minus 8 million Bitcoin in the market. And so when you start looking at that, you're like, wait a second, this is interesting, because if all of a sudden only about 8 million Bitcoin are available and all this new demand is showing up, you're going to have a pretty aggressive price increase because there's just not any Bitcoin, right? And I keep saying that, like, Bitcoiners aren't selling their Bitcoin. And so I think that those market dynamics are going to drive a very aggressive price increase. Earlier, I think this year or end of last year, whatever it was, when we first broke 10,000, I wrote and said, I think we're going to hit 100,000 before the end of 2021. Literally, people were like, "That's insane! You're crazy!" All the stuff. Now all of a sudden, I'm somehow the most conservative person because everyone else is throwing out these wild numbers. 200, 300,000. I have no clue, right? All I know is that it's going to be pretty aggressive. We've got pretty high confidence at $100,000 by the end of 2021. We'll see what happens.